Hey, welcome to the fourth installment of Border 911. So we got several subjects we're going to talk about tonight. The homeland security threat on our southern border, actually the northern and southern border. We're going to continue to talk about the drug flow across the open border, and we're going to talk about still human trafficking and historical immigration coming across the border that are killing Americans at record numbers, killing the aliens at record numbers. But first, we want to go to a national security perspective. First, look, I've been saying for over 2 years. I know Mark Morgan, who's on the team, is saying the same thing. Well, all the members of Border 911 have been saying it, that this is the big national security failure, the biggest national security failure we've seen since 9/11, the southern border. Look, the Border Patrol arrested people from 171 different countries. Many of these countries are sponsors of terror. We got nearly 1.7 million known gotaways. So if they've arrested 264, the Border Patrol arrested 264 people off the terrorist watch list. How many of the 1.7 came from a country sponsoring terror and got into the country? They got away. We don't know who they are, where they went, or where they are right now. But you'd be a fool to think not a single terrorist had crossed the border to do us harm and got away. That 1.7 million concerns me more than anything. So right now, let's get to the team. On the team tonight, we got Mark Morgan. Look, the guy spent 20 years at the FBI. He was a chief patrol agent in the United States Border Patrol. He ended his career in the Trump administration with me as the commissioner of CBP. That guy's the one that built the 465 miles of wall. Don't let anybody, including Chris Christie, tell you anything different. We got Victor Avila down there on the screen. Victor was senior special agent with ICE. His entire career, spent a lot of his career in Mexico, working the criminal cartels, working trafficking cases, working drug cases. He's joining us tonight. And last, we got Derek Maltz, career with the Drug Enforcement Administration. And Derek's have been pushing a story for 2 years across this nation about the dangers of the southern border and the fentanyl crisis, not unrelated. One is directly related to the other, so we'll get to Derek shortly. So let's go to Mark first. Mark, counting on your 20 years in the FBI, you and I have had a lot of discussions on that. The DHS just put out a threat assessment just a week ago. And I know you reviewed it. I reviewed it, Mark. I want you, based on your 20 years of FBI experience, based on your time on the border with the CBP, what is the concern you have after you read that assessment?
Look, not only that assessment, of course, but also the terrorist attacks in Israel that were just carried out on October 7th. Tom, this should serve as a wake-up call for our entire nation. But we've been saying what you've been saying, what everybody here tonight has been saying, that border security is synonymous with national security. And what's really important with respect to this DHS assessment, they, for once, for the first time, the Biden administration has confirmed what we've been saying, is that the vulnerability specifically related to the unprecedented historic high levels of the flow of illegal immigration is absolutely being exploited by cartels, criminals, as well as potential terrorist organizations. And so when we look at what's happening right now in Israel, what did happen, there's two important things that really should serve as that wake-up call for this country. First, Tom, is that global terrorism is alive and well. The Islamic ideology has never wavered. It has not gone away. And why is that important for our country? Because the same Islamic terrorists that carried out the horrific attacks in Israel that murdered babies, killed innocent non-combatant civilians, those same organizations, their commitment is unwavering to do harm and bring harm to our homeland. The second thing that should really be a wake-up call is that it served as a complete colossal intelligence failure. Now, look, I'm not saying that for attribution, but that's just a fact. And so what does that mean for us? Well, that means as great as our own intelligence apparatus is within the United States, it's not infallible. We have wide sweeping intelligence gaps. And one of the very important issues right now that's up on the screen right now, Tom, you mentioned, is the past 33 months under the Biden administration, the Border Patrol alone has apprehended over 264 illegal aliens on the terror watch list. And what does that mean? That means that our intelligence community actually has specific derogatory information related to that individual, that they could have connections to terrorist organizations and they pose a potential national security threat to us. That's what we've apprehended. In addition to that, there's a second category that we've all been talking for a very long time. I know Victor has, Tom, we have, but it's just now started to talk about because of what happened in Israel. It's called special interest aliens. Think about this. In the past 33 months, we've apprehended individuals from 170 different countries. There's only 195 recognized countries in the world. And right now, you're looking at just a small example of the aliens that were apprehended in between our borders in the past 33 months. Why is that important? Because these countries we know have connections to terrorism, harbor terrorism. They allow a safe harbor and safe haven for terrorism in their country. And think about that. In the last 33 months, we have apprehended tens of thousands of aliens, again, that we call special interest aliens from countries that we know harbor or have connections to terrorism. That is terrifying. And what's happening right now in the Border Patrol, they are apprehending this. And if we can't get anything on these individuals, if there's no criminal history that they committed a crime in the United States, we're actually processing and releasing the United States. And here's something that's very important. So if we get an adult male of military age between 18 to 45 from Lebanon, do you really think the Lebanese government is actually providing this information, whether they're actually connected to Hezbollah? Of course, that's not happened. But this administration is processing and releasing them in the United States anyway. And this brings me to my last point, why this should be terrifying, what's happening at the border right now. Gotaways. And Tom, you mentioned it. In the first 33 months of this administration, we've had between 1.6 and 1.7 million known gotaways. The former chief of the Border Patrol during congressional testimony said that's underreported up to 20%. So we're looking somewhere north of 2 million plus total gotaways in this country just the past 33 months. Why is that important? Well, I'll go back to why I said this should serve as a wake-up call. Our intelligence is not important. And Tom, in your opening, you said it. So how many of those individuals, how many of the aliens that are on the FBI's terror watch list, or how many special interest aliens that we have no idea who they are part of the 1.6 to 1.7 million gotaways? Here's the fact. Our intelligence community, we don't know. That's an intelligence gap. And that should scare and shock every American in this country. And the last thing that I'll say is, think about this. We could literally have a sleeper cell in the United States that was part of that 1.6 to 1.7 million known gotaways right now that's planning the next terrorist attack. And does our intelligence community know about that? The answer is no, they do not. So when they say that they have no credible specific intelligence right now of a specific threat, what that really means is they just don't know. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is that, look, right now we've seen it in living color, people in our own country that have an ideology. These aren't protests in support of Palestine. These are rallies in support of a terrorist organization. They are already well entrenched in the ideology. And by experiencing the FBI, to go from ideology to radicalization to be inspired by action, there's a self-radicalization process, or there's a specific event that leads to that inspiration. We've had that, and I think we're seeing the movement from ideology to radicalization, and then a move to action. I think we're seeing that in living color with our own eyes right now, Tom.
Yeah, look, I'm reflecting on a couple things you said. First of all, your last point is fantastic. Look, the Secretary of Homeland Security, my organization, will be concentrating on real domestic terrorism, this ideology, rather than parents that go to school board meetings or Trump supporters being domestic terrorists. A couple things I want to hit on. We can put that chart back up of the thousands of SIs arrested. Mark, what's really sad, I want you to comment on this because, again, you worked for President Trump. You ran CBP as the administrator, the director, the commissioner. I guess we should call the commissioner. Look at those numbers. And while you're and the reason these numbers even got out is because you and I know that those numbers were leaked, and you were able to get them out to your network. I got them out to my network because this administration wasn't showing these numbers. This administration is not talking about it. They claim to be, the President Biden's claimed this is the most transparent administration in the history, and you and I both know differently. So I'd like you to speak to the 60, get back to the 264 people that was arrested on the terrorist watch list. 4 years, when you're the commissioner of CBP, it's my understanding in 4 years, we got 11. Can you verify that, me?
Yeah. So that number is exactly right. I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot to talk about that. That's a very important part, is that, think about that. In fact, last month, in September, the month of September, Border Patrol apprehended more illegal aliens on the terror watch list than the entire 4 years combined under the administration in a 30-day period. Again, this is shocking. This should be alarming to everyone. And also the special interest aliens. Here's another key about this, all right? We encountered special interest aliens, but here was the difference. The Biden administration, when they encounter a special interest alien who we know nothing about, who could literally have an ideology, could literally be supportive of a terrorist organization, could be a terrorist, but we have no idea because maybe they didn't make a ripple in the pond and they're just not up on our borders, our intelligence radar. Think about this. The Biden administration, Tom, is releasing them in the United States. That's insanity. Under the Trump administration, you were there. We were all there. The difference was if we ran into an SIA, we weren't releasing them in the United States. We were detaining them. And that's exactly what should be happening. And if we can't 100% verify that they do not pose a threat to this country, they should be removed. They should never be released in this country.
One of the many reasons why the Trump administration ended the catch and release. We ended it. So look, it's a huge national security affair. They look, folks. This is why we call our get together here, our push Border 911, because the vulnerable border is a national emergency. It's I'll say it 1,000 times, the biggest national security affair I've seen since 9/11. Now, Victor Avila, I know you were down. You worked in Mexico for years. You've been involved with a lot of arrests of SIAs coming across our border. What can you add to the discussion that me and Mark are having now?
Well, I'll just add to Mark, and Mark is spot on, especially the word that came to me when Mark was talking is the difference between the prior administration and this administration. Is called enforcement, law enforcement. It doesn't exist right now. Back then, when I investigated SIAs in Mexico that were present there, I got special access to interview them through special interpreters, and I was, oh my God, what are these people doing in Mexico already? Because they know that they're as good as being in the U.S. once they're in Mexico. Mexico has been a hub for them for many years, but the big difference here is when we detected them back then, we would detain them and do the thorough investigation and vetting of the individual, something that is not occurring today. All these individuals, by the way, the Venezuelans, you hear a lot about the Venezuelans coming over. And there's a big misconception because for some reason, because they happen to be Venezuelan nationals, that all of a sudden you're allowed to let them in. They're not claiming credible fear. They're not claiming asylum. They're not even mentioning any of that. They're coming in through the CBP One app, or they're coming through the river because they know they have a 100% chance of being let into the country. But here's the thing. Most of them haven't lived in Venezuela. Most of them have lived in Nicaragua, in Peru, and Colombia, and the surrounding countries, sometimes for 4 to 5, 7 years. And they have established their lives there. They've had children there. They have businesses there. They have work. But because of the invitation of this administration, they said, well, I'm going to leave everything, sell everything. That's why when you see them at the border, they're not impoverished people. They're dressed okay. They're enough to say, well, you know what? I'm going to take my chances and go to the U.S. because my cousin already made it, and all these friends already made it. And that's what you're seeing in New York, and you're seeing all that. But going back to the SIAs, this is the national security issue. I investigated Afghan smuggling through Mexico, Chinese smuggling. I did an incredible case from China through Mexico to New York. It's been happening. But when you take away the enforcement portion of it, it really, we are at a vulnerable state. When Liz put up the chart of the different special interest aliens, the Mauritanians, let me tell you, I talked to a lot of people up in the New York area, and they have look at that number. They have an incredible issue. 15,000 people, a lot of them are concentrated in the northeast part of the country, and they bring what Mark talked about, the ideology, the different culture. They're not assimilating to our culture. They're not assimilating to our laws. They're not assimilating to everything that we as the United States citizens are used to following. And I'm talking about rapes. I'm talking about crimes. And they have real issues in New York with that because that's the way it is in their country. And that's the big shift that I've been seeing here in the last 30 some plus months, that the people are not wanting to be Americans. They want to bring their country here and still get the fruits of this government to take care of them.
we're going to first of all, the CBP one app. We're going to talk about that at the end of the show, because that and the whole Venezuela thing just that just pisses me off, because the secretary on one hand gives TPS because the country conditions are unsafe, but he's doing some deportations. It just don't make sense. But I want to go back to the Chinese chart, and I want to go back to Morgan. Look, Mark, I know in the FBI you guys investigate Chinese cybercrime. You investigate Chinese espionage. Look. The Chinese chart that came up shows how many Chinese are coming across the border. And folks that are listening, this is just what we caught. Again, get back to the 1.7 million gotaways. How many Chinese nationals got into the country and weren't apprehended, and they're in this country doing who knows what? And Mark, I want you to talk about this chart, Mark, and your experience with Chinese. This concerns me. This, with China, I think is our biggest adversary in the world. This concerns me greatly.
Yeah, let's keep this chart up for a second, because I really want people, as they're listening, to read every word of this chart, especially the bottom. A 7,000+% increase when this administration took over. That is astronomical. Again, that should be a warning order for everybody in this country. And you're right. So, Tom, when we talk about national security, that border security is national security. It's not just threats from global extremists, from terrorists. It's also from other actors such as China, as you said. Right now, China poses one of the most significant threats to this country, really globally, on the technological front. Counter-proliferation every single day. When I was specializing in the FBI, we were absolutely worried about how they had infiltrated universities and how they're there trying to steal our technology and leverage that for their own state's interest. So it is an incredible threat. But yet this administration, Tom, there's no mention of that. A 7,000% increase, and not one word from this administration, not one word from the open border advocates, not one word from the Democratic Party whatsoever. They're not even asking the question, hey, why is this happening? We don't know. I don't know. But our intelligence community, they should be focused on that. So I really have two questions. One, is our intelligence community even putting assets towards this? Do they even have their eye on the ball? Are they too worried about domestic terrorism that's happening in this country? This is a real concern and a real issue. And one last thing, I want to comment, put something Victor said. He talked about a big difference between the Biden administration and this administration being enforcement. I got to tell you, that's probably the best thing that's been said so far. That's absolutely correct. Right now, because of the Border Patrol, 7.7 million total nationwide encounters in 33 months. The Border Patrol is overwhelmed. They've really been relegated from an enforcement mission to a national processing organization. They're not vetting. They're not doing any interviews. They're not having in-depth discussions with these special interest aliens. It's not happening. Not only are they not getting information back from countries that we know are sponsoring terrorism, but we're not conducting basic interrogations, investigations, and interviews to collect derogatory information before they're releasing them. That's what's happening under this administration.
So this is a perfect segue. China, who's making the precursors to create fentanyl, selling to the criminal cartels in Mexico, killing over 100,000 Americans. Perfect segue to Derek. Derek, I read a story, and you can talk about the fentanyl. I know you have some updated numbers for us, but I read a story this week where the criminal cartels are threatening the members of the cartel, get out of the fentanyl business, or we're going to, in some cases, kill the members of the cartel who produce it. I think it's bullshit. I think it's just a marketing ploy. Derek, have you seen that story, and what's your thoughts on it?
Okay, so before I get to that, I want to go back to the Chinese numbers real quickly. America has to realize that the Mexican cartels have formed a lethal partnership with the Chinese transnational criminals. So when we see the escalation of these illegals coming into America, they're providing money laundering services in this country. They're picking up millions of dollars from cartels all over the country that turn into cash over to Chinese businessmen who are then using the cash in America to buy real estate, to buy property, to buy farms near our military installations. This is another national security threat that no one's talking about. So, Tom, remember, if you want to produce fentanyl, you need the chemicals and you need the money. Well, the Chinese are providing those two critical services to the cartels as our kids are dying at record levels. So now to go to your question, right? So yeah, there's a lot of news over the last couple of weeks about how the cartels are putting out these death threats to anybody that are producing, fentanyl in Mexico. Well, I believe it's another deceptive propaganda campaign because remember, in February, we seized a very large-scale fentanyl lab in Mexico, and the president came out and said they don't produce fentanyl in Mexico. So AMLO lied to the world. So I believe there's a lot of heat lately on the Sinaloa cartel with the Chapo Guzman's son extradition. I believe that they're trying to cool things down. We did get some intelligence that Sinaloa was putting out warnings to independent fentanyl manufacturers that they have to stop, they have to slow down. But look at the numbers. Just look at the statistics. Right now, we have record-breaking seizures by both CBP, DEA, and law enforcement. But here's the big problem. When you look at CBP statistics, 25,000 pounds already in 11 months being seized. What concerns me is not what's being seized, what has gotten into this country that's killing our kids. If you look at the DEA working with their partners down in Phoenix, Arizona alone, they've already seized 42 million fake pills. Last year, DEA seized 66 million. In Phoenix alone, 42 million pills were seized this year. Now, why is that a problem? Because the Sinaloa cartel controls the POEs and the entries into Arizona. So it shows that the cartel production and distribution of fentanyl has not really slowed down. So there's another thing, Tom, I did find out, from talking to sources in Mexico and DEA, that there has been some, conversation that the Cartel Jalisco New Generation has kind of started to maybe focus more on meth and cocaine. But again, the numbers don't support any of this. The kids are dying at record levels. The drug seizures at the border, inside the country, are at record levels. So I think it's a bunch of propaganda. I don't trust what they're saying in Mexico. And one other thing I forgot to say, the purity of these pills, is going up. In 2020, 28% of the pills seized by DEA and analyzed had a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. In 21, it went up to 42%. In 22, it went up to 60%. The DEA administrator just put out that 7 out of 10 pills that they have seized and analyzed have a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. So over the last 2 years, the DEA alone, working with their partners, according to the DEA's administrator, 700 million potentially fatal overdose or lethal poisonings, I should say, have been prevented. But so again, this is very, very complex. It's a disaster. It's catastrophic. We've never in the history of this country have ever seen anything like this. It's a mass poisoning against our citizens. China's fingerprints are all over it. They're using the cartels as the proxy to do the dirty work. Our government's not even putting it all together. They're not going after China. They're not really going after Mexican cartels. So it's a very large scale problem. My concern is our future generation is being decimated and our families are being destroyed. Our communities are being destroyed and the government has no sense of urgency.
You said, so I'd like you to comment on that. And I want to go over to Mark Moore and get his comment on the same point. You said earlier about, how the fentanyl's coming across open border. Because all of us, everybody on the screen, everybody in Border 911 has been saying for 2 years that the criminal cartels are creating gaps on our southern border by pushing large groups of illegal aliens, creating a humanitarian crisis that overwhelms the Border Patrol. So most sectors, 70 to 90% of agents are pulled off the line dealing with the humanitarian crisis. We talked about this many times. And that's when they move the fentanyl across because no one's there to stop them. It's not a coincidence in the last 3 years of historic illegal immigration that's overwhelmed the Border Patrol. Matter of fact, last week in Eagle Pass, they took every single agent off the line to deal with the overcrowding of everybody they arrested. Every single agent off the border for a day and a half. In El Paso, a couple months ago, they did the same thing. Every agent off the line. So some sectors, they actually take 100% of the agents off the line, which is a field day for the cartels of trafficking women and children to move known suspected terrorists and move fentanyl. The Democrats on the Hill like to say, well, most of the fentanyl is coming through the port of entries. There's a lot of fentanyl coming through the port of entries. What the difference is, every vehicle stopped, every driver is spoken to. And depending on his answers, depending on the CBP targeting system, which is a system we can't really talk about what's in it, but they push that license plate number in, that may tell the officer, this may be a car you want a secondary. So, of course, more fentanyl seized at a port of entry, but what's coming between the port of entries, and you just mentioned it, we don't, we know they're seizing, but what's scary is what they're not seizing. So I want your opinion on this, because I heard you talk about before, I want our listeners to understand. Fentanyl is coming across between the port of entries at record numbers. I think the cartels use a route of least resistance. What do you say to that, Derek? And I want to go to Mark on the same question.
Well, I'm going to go back to what Mark said before. It's a gap in intelligence. We don't know how many terrorists are coming into the country. We don't know how many child molesters and rapists are coming to the country. We certainly don't know how much fentanyl and methamphetamine is crossing in between the ports of entry. Everyone's guessing. And yeah, they want to say, we seized 90%, at the southwest border. But, I'm sorry, that 90% of the drug flow is the southwest border. But here's my question to you and Mark, the experts on the border. What's the percentage of drugs we actually seize? 10%? Is that a fair number? Well, if it's 10%, look at the amount of drugs that have been seized by CBP and DEA and HSI and the other agencies. So we have no idea how much drugs are in this country on our streets. It's flooded. There's a tsunami of drugs. So, yeah, I don't buy it. It's just another political stunt to mislead and deceive the American public.
Mark.
Yeah, hey, Derek, well said, brother. I agree with everything you just said. And Tom, to foot stomp on what you said, this is why we all say, and I know we're all on this, we've been saying this for a long time, that illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. There's a cause and effect. That's why we talk about illegal immigration. And we really emphasize the illegal part, which besides the fact it's a crime, violates our sovereignty as a nation. There's a cause and effect, Tom, as you described. As illegal aliens come across, the cartels actually use them as a distraction technique, as you explained. That leaves the border wide open, unpatrolled for the cartels to exploit. And with the millions that we've had, we've literally handed operational control of the majority of our border to the cartels to exploit. And look, as a commissioner, as a commissioner, I can tell you, I keep hearing the same bullshit argument from open border advocates and Democrats that, the majority of drugs are seized at the border. Well, first of all, that doesn't mean anything, because as Derek said, the real test of success and the real measure is through our intelligence. What do we know about what we're not seizing? And that is a significant, colossal intelligence gap. I mean, look at this. We know the border is wide open in the land border because border patrol agents aren't there. They're processing illegal aliens. We have the tunnels that they're utilizing. We have the air environment. We have the maritime environment. The truth is, Tom, we have no idea the amount of drugs that are getting past us, but we do know they are. And what's one of the biggest indicators that we know? Last year, 112,000 Americans died from drug overdose and poisoning. 100,006 a year before, and over 100,000 a year before. That stat alone should be a wake up to this entire country that our borders are wide open and we are not stopping the drug coming through, killing Americans every single day.
And the overdose death speaking, Mark, that speaks to everything, right? So when Mayorkas talks about we're seizing record amounts of drugs, we're successful. No, it's not a coincidence. We have historic number of overdose deaths of fentanyl since this administration has been in power. Compare their numbers to the previous administration.
We should be thanking CBP, DEA, HSI, FBI, all the state locals, because they're saving millions of lives by taking this poison off the street.
Absolutely. I mean, the men on the front line is saving millions of lives. And again, it all goes back to not securing the border. When securing the border, I've said many times, a secure border saves lives, not only of migrants, but U.S. citizens and women and children of sex trafficking. Look, we got over nearly 2,000 migrants have died on U.S. soil just last month. Mark got a report today, just last month, 26 dead migrants in 1 month. This administration don't want to talk about that, but the Biden administration policies they keep comparing themselves to the Trump administration. Oh, you guys are inhumane, and we're much more humane. Look, when President Trump had illegal immigration down 83%, where 83% less people are coming, less people are dying, both Americans and migrants. If you take 83% of the cars off the freeway, will there be less highway deaths? Of course. So the last administration, I think, saved thousands of lives, and this administration is killing people at record numbers. Look, I want to get to we all been talking about the narcotics, and we talk about terrorism, but we still got to get back to the historic immigration on the border. But first, I want to get to a quick commercial break. Then we'll come right back and talk about the historic, the third record-breaking year, and this year is going to break all the previous 2 years. So we'll get back to that right after this commercial.
Literally, it's not hyperbolic to say the next sleeper cell could be in the United States planning the next terrorist attack, and we would have absolutely no idea. And that is in part because of Secretary Mayorkas' complete abdication of his constitutional responsibilities. Look, the American people didn't vote for Secretary Mayorkas. They had no say in Secretary Mayorkas. He was placed there. Well, he can be removed, and he should be removed, and his reign of terror should end.
My Towels solved a problem that we've all had with towels. You go into the stores and they feel lotiony and soft, but then you get them home and they wind dry you. That's why I made My Towels. They actually work, they're soft, and they absorb. And now I'm excited to announce 2 brand new lines of My Towels. What makes them the best towels ever is they're now made with 100% long staple Shapir cotton. This is a combed ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory sale price as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for only $29.98. Or you can get my designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save 50% now on all My Towels. They actually work. What a concept. This offer won't last long, so please order now.
mypillow.com.
So the pills are rampant in the cities all throughout America. The cartels are making billions. The border is wide open. There was enough fentanyl seized by the DEA alone to kill everyone in America.
Well, look, welcome back. And the video you just saw is the reason why we created Border 911. And I'll say it again, every one of us, not only is this the greatest team of border experts imaginable, best border experts in the world, they're also my friends. And we have conversations every day. I think we all wake up. I saw Derek's emotion tonight. I see Mark's emotion and Victor. We all wake up every day pissed off at what this administration has done to the security of the United States. And like I say many times, it's just not about illegal immigration. When you create a crisis this big, it creates a national security crisis that we talked about, a public safety, a public health crisis that we just talked about with the drugs. And it's again, killing people at record numbers. So under the Trump administration, the prior administration, when we had a 45-year low, illegal immigration, 83 to 90% down, depending on what time frame you look at. And we got a president came in office and unsecured the border that's creating all this death and mayhem and sex trafficking and all these things we're talking about. And that's why we created Border 911, so we can educate the American people in the next 13 months. So when they get to the voting booth in 2024, they're going to vote for the person who's going to guarantee them border security. Because border security, as Mark said earlier, you can't have national security without border security. You don't really have border security without interior enforcement, which brings us to ICE and immigration enforcement. But look, I won't go to Mark right now because me and Mark worked together in the Trump administration. I ran ICE, Mark was head of CBP. Mark, talk about, and look, I know these numbers as well as anybody. I know they're on the back of my hand. How many aliens have been arrested first year under Biden, second year under Biden, third year under Biden? We all know the numbers. But since you ran CBP, compare the last year of Trump administration and what we're seeing the last 3 years on this administration, please.
Look, Tom, real quick, let's run over those numbers real quick. The first year of the Trump administration, 1.9 million total nationwide encounters. Then it went up to 2.7, and this year we're going to hit 3.1. The first year, 1.9, was the highest ever in our nation's history since we've been keeping data. And right now, this fiscal year, we're going to be, again, approaching like 3.1 million. That's going to be darn close to a 500% increase from the last year under the Trump administration. This is not another surge, as a open border advocates and this White House want to make you believe. This is a colossal self-inflicted crisis that we've never seen in our lifetime before. And Tom, as you said, there's really a three-legged stool. And this is why this election is going to be so important. Because if you don't vote for a person, for the right conservative to get back into the White House that understands border security is national security, the threats, they're going to continue to come. You're going to be voting for criminals coming across, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, gang members. You're going to be voting for drugs to continue to come across, kill Americans every single day. And you're going to be voting for national security threats coming across our border every single day. This is not hyperbole. This is extremely serious to the future of our nation. Tom, I know you've said, I know we've all said it. It's not a matter of when the threat is going to come. The threat is already here. How many more Americans have to die from drug overdoses? How many more Americans victims have to be put forth at the hands of an illegal alien that should have never been here? I mean, Tom, something's got to change. This country's got to wake up.
Understand is that over this past several years under the Biden administration, I hear so many people say, "Well, they're asylum seekers. They're escaping fear and persecution. They have a right to claim asylum." Look, yes, they have a right to claim. Anybody has a right to claim asylum. But let's make one thing perfectly clear. First of all, you see these big groups coming up carrying the flags of their homeland. It's hard to believe that someone's going to carry the flag of the persecutor. First of all, second of all, let's look at the real data. Immigration court data over the last decades clearly shows nearly 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at our southern border will never get relief from U.S. courts because they simply don't qualify, or they don't show up in court because they don't qualify. So 9 out of 10, nearly 9, I think the number is actually like 86.8 or something like that, 87 point. It's nearly 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum never get relief because they simply don't qualify, they don't show up in court. Now, what happens to that 9 out of 10 that lose their case in court? I can tell you this, based on Homeland Security Life Cycle Report, Secretary Marcus, every secretary puts this report out, it says this, that 9 out of 10 that lose their case, what happens to them? Well, if they're a family group, that 9 out of 10 leaves 6% of the time. I mean, this is why this administration is releasing them, not detaining them, because they know 9 out of 10 will fail because they don't really qualify for asylum. But if we don't detain them, they're never leaving. And even if the ones that lose their case, you know, is ICE looking for them? No, I know that for a fact. ICE isn't even looking for the one losing their cases because Secretary Mayorkas is on record saying being in the country illegally on his own is not enough for ICE to go seek an arrest. So anybody's going to come to the United States. If they know they can cross illegally, they know they make a claim to asylum and be released. They know that they'll get work authorization for the next 5, 6, 7 years while they're fighting their case. They know they can get in-state tuition in sanctuary cities and get a driver's license and get a job. And guess what? The 9 out of 10 that lose, no one's looking for you. So you hide out long enough, waiting for the next amnesty, waiting for the next DACA, the next giveaway program. That's what this administration is doing. This administration knows exactly why they're doing this. They know exactly why they're releasing them, not detaining them. And this is the backstory. So I'm sick and tired of people saying, well, they're asylum seekers. They may be asylum seekers, but 9 out of 10 clearly don't qualify. Mark, yes.
Yeah, just real quick. So you're absolutely right. Let's be clear. They're not actually looking for asylum. They're looking to take advantage of the asylum process because under this administration, that means they're going to be released into the country. And here's the last thing I'll say about this is where did we lose sight that, okay, if you're a legitimate asylum seeker, when did it become wrong to demand that they walk up to a lawful point of entry and they file asylum. They abide by our laws of a sovereign nation. We lost complete track of that. There's no excuse for someone illegally entering the United States. There's absolutely no excuse for that. But we look the other way. Somehow illegal immigration is somehow okay. The end justifies the means. No, it's not. And then they completely lose sight of the fact that what it causes, as we discussed, pulls resources off the front line. We hand operational control over the cartels for drugs, criminals, and national security threats to pour into our country every single day. No, enough is enough. We've got to change course.
Victor, you've been on the board. Victor, you've been on the board last few weeks. I'm sorry, but you've been on the board last few weeks. You've been on the board for years. Jump in on this. You talked earlier about the aliens you're seeing crossing and the Venezuelans and the CBP app. Give us your perspective. You're down on the border an awful lot.
And then you brought exactly the point that I was at, the CBP app. And the process that this administration is making them go through is illegal. They're illegally administering the asylum criteria. They're illegally administering the parole benefit system. You cannot be given paroles just because you're allowing people to come into the country. As a special agent, I had the authority to issue these public benefit paroles, law enforcement paroles, humanitarian paroles, and there's a very strict process. This administration is abusing these systems, like Mark mentioned. And so what's going to happen here is that all these people that have come in, especially under this administration, they're going to find themselves next year without any status whatsoever, because we all know here that if we conduct a search warrant under false premises and get that fruit out of the poisonous tree, none of that is accessible and admissible. Same thing here. You cannot be issuing illegal type documents and benefits because they're really not, they're not going to be able to be used. And they're not going to be able to do that. But of course, it's going to be followed by enforcement. But I was just at an Eagle Pass on this past Saturday, and that Quemado, Normandy area. It hasn't stopped, but they're coming through these. Let me tell you, the CBP app is probably the biggest fraud of any other system that I've ever seen, blatantly being put in practice to allow people to come in this country. They're filling in this information on this app that grants them a parole. And not only in some cases does it grant them the parole, it grants them a work authorization permit. Some are coming with money assisted by the UN down in the Darien Gap, debit cards with $2,500 on them. They're demanding those cards to be reloaded with more cash. I mean, it's happening right in front of us. And every time I go down there and I see it happening, it's a very frustrating situation to be as you see it happening, because our border agents are so demoralized. And I feel so bad for them, because there's a big struggle between the state of Texas and the federal government right now, especially in Eagle Pass and El Paso. We're not on the same page, which I know all of us here worked with our state and locals all the time. This was something that was given. It's not happening. And it's a shame that the Biden administration favors the cartels. They favor other nations other than our own. And I wanted to take advantage real quick and talk about seizures, because I see seizures. We talk a lot about seizures and the record number of seizures. As an ex-narcotic agent, when we saw those record numbers of seizures down at the port of entry in El Paso on the border, we knew we were getting our asses handed to us. We knew that this is not good, although we always welcome the seizures. The seizures are great, and that's drugs off of the streets. But it's not an indicator, and this is how the left and the Biden administration want to switch it around and turn the tables and say, look at all these drugs. We're taking them off the street. They're not making them into our country. Absolutely false. It's actually the other way around. The higher the seizures, the worse it's coming in. It's like Derek said, it's a tsunami. It's coming in. And what's the percentage? Maybe 10, 15% that we're actually catching. And so I want to do the connection here, because we haven't really talked a lot about, we talked a little bit about national security, but I want people to understand the connection between these terrorist groups and the cartels. I know, Derek, you know about this, and Hamas and Hezbollah, they seek working for the cartels and with the cartels because the cartels are making billions of dollars, and these terrorist organizations need to finance their terrorist activities. And so they have also infiltrated Mexico. And like you said, Tom, they're loving it right now. They're having a free-for-all because now there's no one impeding them. They actually have a free-for-all to either bring in. They've built communities in Mexico so much that they build churches and mosques, and these guys get special permissions to shave their beard. They speak Spanish, and in they come with the group saying they're from Venezuela. Well, guess what? There's a big terrorist group in Venezuela working with the terrorists in the Middle East, and the cartel de los soles, one of the cartels that you don't hear mentioned that much. These guys have been infiltrated a lot, and they want to continue to bring those people for different reasons, right? People talk about the ideology. Mark, you mentioned the ideology. And I say this: death is death, and terrorism is terrorism. I talked to someone earlier this week when the attacks in Israel happened, and I'm like, well, this has been going on in Mexico for a long time, and there's been terrorists on the other side of the border. They call them cartels, but they also cut off heads. They also skin people alive. They also take the hearts out of the chest, and hold them in their hand. They're vicious. And they've been killing tens and hundreds of thousands of people on both sides of the border. But for some reason, because it's not a bullet, it's not a bomb, it's a counterfeit pill, we've been ignoring it.
I've said many times, Victor, that the cartels in Mexico have killed more Americans than any terrorist organization. But real quick, I want to twist on something you said earlier, the CBP-1 app. Secretary Mayorkas says he created these legal pathways. First of all, I agree with you, it's not legal. You can only issue a parole on a case-by-case basis, looking at the specifics of a case and weighing those specifics, and it's going to result in significant public benefit. But the thing to understand is the case-by-case analysis, and he's bringing thousands a day. And he thought by doing this, by hiding illegal immigration, by bringing them through the port of entries, it's just illegal aliens, but he's bringing them through the port of entry. He thought that would push the border numbers down so you can say, success here. But as we can see over the last couple of months, a couple of times last month, they had 11,000 apprehensions one day between the ports of entry. So this program is blown for the face. He will lose it in court because 20 states have sued him. He will lose it, but he knows he's going to lose it. So what does he do? He awards TPS, temporary protected status, to 500,000 Venezuelans because he knows it's coming. The day is coming. They're going to say, you can't do this anymore. It's illegal. But he's already got the end result where he's given TPS, which is his priority. It can't be changed. So look, this guy's a snake. I know Mark, I've heard Mark say it. You say it. I've said it. He does every time his lips are moving. He's lying to American people. These aren't legal pathways. He's legalizing illegal immigration by bringing a port of entry. Hard stop.
And I'll just
right
say
there.
this: it is a sight to see. It's a sight to see the illegals coming through the river, and a line of illegals coming in through the port of entry. The ones that actually came through the app are walking through the pedestrian lane, and you were getting hit from both sides. And you know what I saw last time I talked to several of them? A lot of them are not even wanting to do the CBP-1 app anymore. They're like, the hell with it. I'm not going to want to put my information and anything on an app. I'm just going to walk in through the river. And the smuggling, don't forget the smuggling. 270 stash houses in El Paso of human beings. Stash houses. Why? Because the smuggling still continues. We have a large group of people that do not want to do any process. The process they want is to come in here completely undetected.
And we're not even talking about, I'll go to Mark on this one. We're not even talking about what does this do to legal trade and travel? I mean, people that want to come through the port of entry to get the visa stamp or for the cargo trucks that, Mark, you have the numbers, how many travelers come through the port of entries. This has to have an effect on the same people that are serving the legal trade and travel of the United States.
Yeah, Tom, that's another thing that this administration just refuses to talk about. The CBP officers at the 300 plus ports of entry that we have throughout the United States, they process about over 400 million lawful passengers annually. That's a tremendous volume. And so just like Border Patrol is overwhelmed with the numbers they have illegally entering in between the ports of entry, when you increase the volume coming to ports of entry it has the same detrimental effect on officers at our ports doing their job. I'll just give you one example of many. Southbound operations. We know the Mexican cartel. We know the Mexican government. There's nothing going on with respect to what's going from the United States to Mexico. One of the big things, obviously, is currency going that way and weapons. And so when I was commissioner, we really beefed up our southbound operations, and it was incredibly successful. The millions and millions of dollars of U.S. currency and weapons we discovered was instrumentally successful. Those type of proactive law enforcement operations are non-existent. Just like border patrols have shut down many of their interior checkpoints. Again, I'm going to go back to saying this again and again. Illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. It pulls resources away. It leaves our borders vulnerable as well as our ports. It pulls resources off their law enforcement and national security mission. We have an operational control of the cartels.
And I'll end with this comment, and I'll go with Derek for closing comments. Great show. Hey, great discussions tonight. But as you said, Mark, I think, this affects, look, the people that want to come to this country legally, it's a great honor to be a part of the greatest nation on earth, but there's rules to play by. You can't want to be a part of the greatest country on earth and not follow our laws and disrespect our laws by entering the country legally. And we got millions of people standing in line, filling out the applications, taking their tests, paying their fees, doing their background checks to come to the United States the way they're supposed to come. And I was in New York City up there doing a few shows, and I actually had a driver that he was from Africa, and he told me that, look, I came here as a student, then became a resident alien, then became a citizen because I love this country. I got a wife and 3 kids. I've been trying to get to the United States the legal way, and they're tied up in this backlog, and it's taken me. I'm already at 3 years now, and I still haven't got them paperwork to come. He goes, but then I see these thousands crossing the border, these family groups, and being released to the United States. I see them here in New York City, and they're being placed in hotels at taxpayer expense. They're getting 3 meals a day, taxpayer expense. They're getting medical care at taxpayer expense. And they're getting work permits. He goes, I'm playing by the rules, and it makes me almost want to think about maybe I should bring my family up that way. But I stopped short of doing it because I became a citizen of this country because I love this country. I want to do things the right way and respect the laws of this country. So it's disgusting what this administration has done to illegal immigration and to legal immigration. And look, great show tonight, great conversation tonight from Border 911 experts. I want to have leave it with Derek because we did talk about drugs. Drugs continue to pour across the country. The fentanyl deaths continue to rise. So Derek, why don't you take it on home for us?
Well, I would just say that under the Biden administration, from my perspective, crime and evil has been legalized in America. I stole that from you, Tom, because you once said that now it's legal to be illegally here in America. But every time we allow those cartels to run operations at the border, we're enhancing their ability to kill Americans. And that's what it comes down to. Like what Victor said before, I just want to say, I was working with the DEA when we did Project Cassandra, which was an operation, multi-agency operation, looking at the cartels in Mexico, working directly with Hezbollah operatives. We had one scheme in that case. They were moving $200 million a month back to Hezbollah to help support Hezbollah's efforts around the world. So the radical initiatives and agenda of Hezbollah in some ways is being funded by not only drug money, but by the criminal money, the arms smuggling, the alien smuggling, right? Well, right now, the Mexican cartels are running the largest human trafficking and sex trafficking operation in the history of America. They're running the largest fentanyl poisoning operation in the history of America. They're hitting historic levels on so much criminal activity. They're making billions of dollars, and every American is going to be impacted if they haven't already been. So thank you, Tom and Mark and Victor. It's great working with you guys, and look forward to the next show.
So as we close Border 911, look forward to seeing you folks on our next podcast. Again, I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it. Border 911. It doesn't get better than this. The true experts of the border, not because they read a book, not because they took a college course, but because they worked the front line. They put handcuffs on people. They prosecuted cartels, and they all had a hand in creating the most secure border in my lifetime. So until next time, thanks for joining Border 911.
He played Found a Mountain, Run, Boys, Run. Devil's in the house of the rising sun. The chicken in the bread pan, picking out dough. Granny, where your dog bite, no child knows.